In the summer of 2021, the once giants of English football went through a drastic change that would in theory bring them back to the glory days. PIF, which is the Saudi Public Investment Fund, took over from former Newcastle United owner Mike Ashley, and while a lot of us expected Newcastle United to just spend big money and buy their way to success, as of today, they actually haven't done so at all. They have spent very wisely picking up good players for good fees. Now, if that is down more to the Premier League cracking down on essentially financial doping when teams spend eye-watering money and break financial fair play rules, or if it's just Newcastle and the PIF, they just don't want to build a team purely based on big names and big money. But one thing, whether you like the PIF or not, one thing that they have done extremely well, they made an extremely smart appointment in hiring former Bournemouth manager Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe had taken Bournemouth to the big time and has proven to be an extremely good manager even before his appointments at Newcastle. But fast forward to today, there are slight rumors, mainly outside of Newcastle, that Eddie Howe has maybe run his course and Newcastle should look for a new manager in the summer. And with Newcastle finishing bottom of their Champions League group, their group was insanely hard, but regardless, them finishing bottom of it and sitting 10th place in the Premier League, 16 points off Champions League spots, do those rumors have a case? Should Eddie Howe be sacked from Newcastle, or should he be kept on, and should they keep with this movement that Eddie Howe is bringing? Well, that's what we will be talking about today. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Back of the Net here. I hope you're all doing well. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Now, for the record, the moment Bournemouth made their first Premier League appearance ever in the 2015-16 season after winning the championship the season prior, I could immediately tell Eddie Howe was a good manager. The team bought into his style of play, they played entertaining football, and despite this being their club's first ever appearance in the Premier League, Bournemouth finished 16th, 5 points clear of the drop zone, and then he kept the club in the Premier League for 4 straight seasons after that until he was eventually sacked on the 1st of August 2020 after Bournemouth got relegated, finishing 1 point out of safety. But despite the somewhat bitter ending for Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, he is still regarded as a legend at Bournemouth, and rightfully so. And most of the footballing world still saw Eddie Howe and still see Eddie Howe as a really good manager that was still very young at the time and could bring a lot to any team that would hire him. So when Newcastle United hired him on the 8th of November 2021 to replace Steve Bruce, who left by mutual consent, and saw Graham Jones take over until the appointment of Eddie Howe, I thought this was a very smart move by Newcastle. Eddie Howe had coached at all levels of English football from League 2 upwards, all the way to the Premier League, where he spent 5 seasons coaching. So while he may have been out of management for a year, little if anyone actually questioned this appointment, and most of us fans around the world, whether you're a fan of Newcastle or not, actually thought this was a really good move by Newcastle. In Eddie Howe's first season at the club, he saw them to an 11th place finish after finishing 12th the year prior under Steve Bruce and Mike Ashley. So on paper, there wasn't much of an improvement, right? Wrong. Outside of finishing 1 place higher and 4 points better off than they did the season prior, they were in a transition year. This wasn't meant to be anything groundbreaking. They were simply trying to weed out the bad players from the good and restructure the whole club from bottom to top. And yet, despite this, off the eye test, they looked much better than the season prior, and each player looked more comfortable in their roles, and you could just see that Newcastle were on the up. With a lot of money backing them and a new manager at the helm, things were looking really bright. So the following season, Newcastle were outstanding and had their highest place finish in the Premier League since the 2002-2003 season, when they were still coached by Sir Bobby Robson. Newcastle finished 4th, a whole 22 points better off than the season prior, and had a whole 53 goals better off in goal difference from the season prior. Add on top of that the fact that Newcastle qualified for the Champions League for the first time again since the 2002-2003 season. Newcastle were filled with so much excitement for the future, and that season exceeded expectations of a lot of fans. But fast forward to today, Newcastle sit 10th in the Premier League, 16 points off Champions League spots. They finished bottom of their Champions League group and are not looking nearly as good as last season. And with a team underperforming, especially in the Premier League, whether you like it or not, regardless of the circumstances, the manager will always be at the front of the storm, and he will always be taking the brunt of the blame for his team's performances. There are now rumors that Eddie Howe might be getting sacked. Now, if you do any sort of research into these rumors, you will be able to see pretty quickly that there isn't much truth behind these rumors, and by all accounts, Eddie Howe seems to be pretty secure in his job as the manager of Newcastle United. But has Newcastle's poor play this season even been Eddie Howe's fault? No, I don't think so. Now, he is the manager, so some of it obviously has to be blamed on him. Regardless of injuries, regardless of whatever is going on at the club, the manager has to get results, and Eddie Howe hasn't done the best at that this season, but I think it'd be very unfair to only blame Eddie Howe. The first thing, the elephant in the room, is that one of Newcastle United's best young talents in Sandro Tonali from AC Milan hasn't been able to play football this season due to a gambling or betting ban or whatever it was. And then on top of that, Newcastle's #1 keeper, Nick Pope, has been out injured since around the beginning of December, forcing Newcastle to go with their second choice keeper, Dubravka, and even having sometimes to go with their third choice keeper, Loris Karius, which could prove costly as we saw when they played against Arsenal. On top of that, as well as dealing with other big injuries to Joe Linton, who has been out since January and won't be back till next season, Sven Botman, who is out for the rest of the season, Callum Wilson, who's been out since February. I mean, Newcastle have had a large chunk of their best players unavailable for large portions of the season. And Newcastle may have some really good top-end talent, but their squad surprisingly isn't as deep as you would expect. To put all the blame of Newcastle's lackluster season on the shoulders of Eddie Howe and Eddie Howe only is ignorant and unfair. Now again, every club, every team has their injuries, has their suspensions, so this can't be the only thing to blame for Newcastle's bad play. But you look at their squad, a lot of their squad is kind of getting old. They haven't got much youth outside of guys like Lewis Miley, Anthony Gordon. They haven't got much youth. Their squad is pretty much late 20s upwards. And if you look at their squad on paper, you can see that they need a big summer. They need a lot of turnover to help keep up with teams like Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, and so on. But luckily for Newcastle, according to sources close to the club, they view Eddie Howe as their architect for the future and will look to back him in the summer. And to me, that is a great move by Newcastle. Eddie Howe is a good manager and has proven time and time again that he is able to take the next step with a club if he's given at least a decent team. Now again, I know Eddie Howe himself has been a little bit lackluster this season. You can't only blame injuries, but this team, on paper at least, isn't all that great, and you would expect PIF to go spend a decent amount of money in the summer to at least, if anything, get a little bit younger, get a little bit more legs in them, and hopefully get a little bit better quality-wise. Eddie Howe should be kept at Newcastle and should be backed in the window, and I'm confident that if this happens, I'm confident when I say this, I think if he is kept, if he is backed in the window, it will pay off drastically. But yeah guys, that's the video. Let me know in the comments below, do you think Eddie Howe is to blame for Newcastle's poor season, or do you think that he is still a really good manager and should be backed in the window and kept as the Newcastle manager? Let me know in the comments below. Please be sure to smash the like button, subscribe if you guys haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.